The young boy sneaked into the locked basement while his older brother wasn't looking, only to discover that his parents, who were supposed to be traveling, had turned into zombies and were imprisoned down there. You have to understand, supplies at home were scarce. They could only rely on eating insects for protein, and on the best days they managed to catch a few mice to feed mom and dad. But over time, even the zombies developed anorexia. To help their parents get proper nutrition, young Benjamin and second brother Oliver decided to go out and kill people to provide extra meals for the basement zombies. But eldest brother Salvador naturally disagreed.
Si las matas, eres un asesino.
Matamos perros.
Soon after, Oliver and Benjamin set off with their cart, arriving near an abandoned building where, although they saw no living people, they encountered a zombie chained up, which Oliver shot dead with his crossbow. Then they went to the spot their brother mentioned and indeed found a man living nearby. The brothers rested there overnight and set up their trap the next morning. Benjamin pretended to be lost and injured, shouting for help to lure the man over. The man believed it was real and moved to assist, only to step right into the trap. Without a word, Oliver shot the man with his crossbow bolt and picked up the hunting rifle the man dropped.
¿Tienes miedo? ¡Mátame! ¡Dispara!
The man grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it into Oliver's eyes, then climbed out of the pit and tackled him. Seeing Oliver about to be strangled to death, Benjamin pulled out a screwdriver and stabbed it hard into the man's back. Oliver quickly grabbed the rifle and got up, while Benjamin picked up a large rock and smashed it forcefully into the man's skull. This boy, who couldn't even bring himself to kill insects, was now capable of such brutal violence against his own kind. The brothers lifted the corpse onto the cart and hauled it away, unaware that someone in the shadows had witnessed the entire scene. How did three brothers, so young, end up in such a state? The story goes back to the year before. The story is set during a time when the zombie virus ravaged the land. Salvador, Oliver, and Benjamin lived isolated in a forest, sustaining their daily lives through hunting. The two younger brothers spent their days playing wildly outside, while Salvador, the eldest, shouldered the responsibility of head of the household in their parents' absence. He was extremely disciplined, starting each day with a fitness routine followed by a large glass of thick, freshly squeezed insect drink to replenish his body's protein needs. Yet, no matter how hard Salvador tried, he couldn't compensate for his missing left leg. This day, luck was with the brothers. They found a small dog in the woods. Perhaps in peaceful times they would have kept this human companion. But now, filling their bellies was paramount, so Salvador hunted the dog without hesitation and took the prize home with his brothers. Youngest brother Benjamin caught a frog, intending to keep it as a pet, but come mealtime, Oliver realized something was wrong. Their brother had clearly cooked the frog. Benjamin realized his pet had met a terrible end and felt deep hatred for his eldest brother.
Cuando vuelvan mis papás les voy a decir que mataste a mi Eres el peor hermano del mundo.
In truth, it wasn't just Benjamin who was angry. Salvador also felt deeply wronged. He was young and longed for freedom like others his age, not to be trapped here playing both father and mother. Suddenly, piercing shrieks echoed from downstairs. Oliver quickly hid his brother in the wardrobe, telling him not to move, then joined Salvador in donning their homemade armor before cautiously entering the basement. Behind the iron door, the tightly secured chains rattled and strained against their restraints. Only Salvador and Oliver knew their parents were imprisoned inside this basement room, and Benjamin would forever be denied the chance to report his brother's misdeeds to normal parents. The next morning, Benjamin woke early. Hearing noises in the yard, he immediately went to report to his brothers. It turned out the dead zombie they had hung in the yard had fallen to the ground. They rehung the zombie in the tree and began their day of chores and exercise. Children this age won't give up playtime no matter what. Though the woods lacked proper toys, Benjamin and Oliver still treated it as their playground. Only Salvador couldn't stay optimistic. His small, cultivated garden had failed again, and frustrated, he harshly interrupted his brothers, telling them to fetch water from the pond and work on the compost pile. Besides the failing crops, they hadn't caught any game in weeks. Salvador needed to search further afield. Oliver became very anxious upon hearing this. He didn't want his brother to risk going alone, but he also had to stay behind to feed their zombie parents in the basement. Just then, Benjamin interrupted his brothers, saying he was too scared to sleep. Salvador reluctantly opened a storybook and began reading Benjamin a Grimm's fairy tale. Today, It was Hansel and Gretel, the one where they leave breadcrumbs to mark their path. Benjamin, hearing the part about monsters appearing in the woods, interrupted his brother to ask if monsters had eaten Mom and Dad. Otherwise, why wouldn't they come back to see them? Salvador forced a calm smile and told Benjamin not to worry, assuring him their parents would return someday. But Benjamin felt sure his brother was lying. The next morning, he quietly got up, took the key from his brother's table, and approached the basement, only to be caught red-handed before he could act.
¡No me van a dejar verlo!
Te dije hasta que tuvieras 10.
Oliver lo vio desde antes de que tuviera 10.
After struggling with the decision, Salvador decided to take Benjamin with him on the trip. Though Salvador was large and strong, Benjamin had 2 healthy legs. In a way, they were equals, and only through cooperation could they survive. Finally, Oliver stayed behind to guard the house and feed their parents, while Salvador left with Benjamin to search for food. Salvador was long accustomed to having only 1 leg, and his daily exercise meant it didn't stop him from riding a bicycle. The brothers approached a building that looked long abandoned. They searched inside for usable supplies, and during this, Salvador was shocked to discover a middle-aged man hanging butchered in a corner, strange symbols painted beside him, likely the work of religious fanatics. All kinds of people existed in this apocalypse. Salvador stopped his brother from going upstairs, lying that there was nothing up there. That evening they rested nearby. Benjamin couldn't understand why they didn't just move into the abandoned building, where they could each have their own room. Salvador explained they had to feed the monsters in the basement. Now that they had found them, they couldn't let them starve, just like Benjamin cared for his little pets. And besides, what if Mom and Dad returned and couldn't find them?
¿Sí van a regresar para Navidad, no?
Later that night, Oliver contacted his brother over the walkie-talkie, saying he was scared. Just earlier, he had tried to feed their parents, but his arms weren't long enough to reach the feeding bowl, so he had to unlock the iron door. Triggered by the scent of food, the zombies nearly lunged at him. Though only slightly older than Benjamin, Oliver was far more mature. After confiding in Salvador, he steeled himself again, not crying or demanding his brother come home immediately. Still, Salvador worried about Oliver. Since they had gathered enough supplies, he decided to head back quickly. The prolonged bike riding strained his amputated leg beyond endurance. Salvador had no choice but to stop and rest briefly. He went to fetch water from the river, specifically leaving the crossbow with Benjamin for protection. Unfortunately, rustling sounds came from the woods while he was collecting water. Salvador jumped up, accidentally knocking his backpack into the river, but there was no time for that now. He rushed back, and they cycled away. Meanwhile, Oliver was nearing a mental breakdown from the feeding duty. He tried contacting his brother, but got no response. The walkie-talkie was likely in the backpack that fell into the water. The sudden loss of contact plunged Oliver into despair, but fortunately, Salvador and Benjamin finally returned the next day. Oliver asked his brother why he didn't answer the calls. Salvador first sent Benjamin to boil water for a bath, and then patiently explained the situation to Oliver. Unbeknownst to them, Benjamin, driven by curiosity, took the key and entered the basement while they were away. He picked up a bone from the ground and threw it inside. Unexpectedly, 2 zombies lunged forward, grabbing Benjamin's clothes tightly, and he finally recognized that these monsters were his own parents. Fortunately, his 2 older brothers appeared just in time to rescue Benjamin. With things having come to this, they could at least tell Benjamin the whole truth. Actually, long before Benjamin was born, a virus called Omega had brought the world to a standstill. However, the situation back then wasn't as severe as it is now. It was just that people couldn't go out to live normal lives, and the economies of various countries collapsed one after another. As the virus kept mutating, the vaccines humans developed were constantly upgraded, but eventually it reached a critical point where the virus mutated faster than the vaccines could be updated. Their parents and other survivors had to use a vaccine that hadn't been fully tested to stay alive, resulting in 83% of people developing the Omega side effect, turning into the state seen in the basement. Luckily, while they still had their sanity, their parents brought the 3 children to a forest far from the city and taught them how to survive in the wilderness. Now the world was in chaos, and it was unclear if anyone could develop a cure for the infected. All Salvador and his brothers could do was take care of their parents and wait for that day to come. Now that Benjamin knew the truth, he had to act like a big kid and help his brothers look after Mom and Dad. And they could also take their parents outside for some fresh air. The three children, fully armed, took the zombies for a walk. The scene was both chilling and heartwarming. Benjamin was especially excited. He kept sharing past events with his mother along the way, believing that if he could make his parents remember their former selves, they could slowly return to normal. The three brothers spent the whole time running around the yard with the zombies.
Denme chance de entrenarlos unos días. Van a ver que tengo razón.
The zombies in this film's setting are different from before. They still have physiological functions like excretion, so the brothers plan to give their parents a bath and clean the basement. Benjamin even got Oliver to help decorate the basement a little, trying to make it look cozier. For a moment, it felt like they had returned to the normal life of a family of 5. Benjamin tirelessly conducted training activities, slowly teaching the 2 zombies to get into bed to sleep and to obey human commands like dogs. It turned out his idea was indeed correct. Now, even if they removed the chains from the zombies' necks, they wouldn't randomly attack humans. Seeing this, Benjamin eagerly took out a notebook, wanting to teach his parents to speak and read.
Hemos avanzado, pero tampoco te la mames. Ellos nunca van a ser como antes. Pero no vas a poder hacer que hablen, ni que se acuerden de quién eras.
After saying this, Salvador brought in a bucket of dead rats. Dad scooped up one and devoured it raw. Seeing this, Benjamin somewhat understood what his brother had said earlier. Although their parents' condition had improved slightly, they were still far from their normal selves. Just then, Mom suddenly squatted by the door, repeating words from the reading book, and the discouraged Benjamin regained his energy. Tomorrow night would be Christmas. Although times were different now, he still looked forward to everyone gathering for a special dinner like last year. Facing the desperate pleas of his 2 younger brothers, Salvador had to compromise. They tied the 2 zombies in the living room to spend Christmas Eve together, and they even took a family photo. Benjamin showed the photo to his parents. Unexpectedly, the zombies suddenly became agitated. Salvador quickly signaled Oliver to find something to gag them. The terrifying howls finally stopped. The 3 ate dinner nervously. Benjamin looked around, still unwilling to give up, wanting to teach his parents to eat real food. Unfortunately, compared to carefully prepared food, the zombies preferred to eat dead rats raw. They waved their spoons around in protest. Just as Salvador was feeling down, he sensed the sound of someone approaching outside, so he picked up his crossbow to check, only to be ambushed by a masked person. Because of his missing leg, Salvador struggled to keep his balance. His weapon was quickly snatched by the masked person, and after taking a few kicks, he fell to the ground. The masked person yanked off the rag covering their face, and Salvador realized it was a woman. She explained she had heard zombie howls and came to investigate. Fortunately, Benjamin and Oliver had already brought their parents back to the basement. The 3 brothers avoided the zombie topic and said they were having Christmas dinner. Hearing this, Valeria relaxed her guard and stayed for a meal, wolfing down everything on her plate. After eating her fill, Valeria asked Salvador for a cigarette. Benjamin noticed her 2 eyes were different colors. Valeria casually lied, "Because I'm a witch." Then she pulled out a backpack, saying she found it in a nearby stream, because the map inside marked this house. She came to look. She hadn't expected to hear roars as soon as she got close, which was why she attacked Salvador first. Valeria couldn't help asking why they had zombies hanging from the tree outside. Salvador explained that it was someone who previously lived in this house, but after turning, his father hung it outside. Valeria suggested they bury the zombies to avoid drawing attention. Then, she asked Salvador if they had seen or heard any planes passing nearby. She'd heard some Russians were flying planes with red cross markings worldwide, dropping refrigerated boxes containing an antidote. She also heard it was a hyperimmune globulin serum. It could reverse the virus symptoms and prevent infection. After hearing this, Salvador scoffed, saying he didn't want to be cured. After all, the world was ruined by a vaccine that wasn't fully tested. So who would believe in a so-called cure? Ignoring Salvador's sarcasm, Valeria just said those Russians rarely flew over this area, and instead of waiting to die in this house, they should go out with her to find the antidote. The reason Valeria wanted to take them along was that all her former companions had been killed by the Torchmen. The Torchmen were likely those religious fanatics. Anyway, Salvador didn't want to deal with outsiders. Just as he was about to ask her to leave, Oliver asked Valeria if she wanted to watch a movie, saying although they only had 1 record and 1 disc, it was better than nothing. Hearing this, Valeria was overjoyed. She hadn't spoken to anyone in months, let alone enjoyed a luxury like watching a movie. Valeria quickly introduced herself and begged Salvador to let her stay for one night. Their projector ran on a bike-powered generator, and Salvador pedaled furiously. His two brothers were already fast asleep, having seen the film countless times. Only Valeria watched it with relish. Salvador soon reached his limit too. He stopped pedaling and called for Oliver to take Benjamin upstairs to rest. Valeria was grateful that Salvador was willing to take her in and went through so much trouble to generate power for the movie. So after taking a long-awaited hot bath, she slipped into Salvador's bedroom. Neither of them had many chances to meet peers of the opposite sex. Salvador certainly couldn't resist this temptation. However, he hadn't forgotten that two zombies lived in the basement and still insisted Valeria leave at first light. Late at night, Salvador dreamed of the day he was injured. His calf was bitten by a zombie. His mother, once a head nurse, knew well that to stop the virus spreading, amputation was necessary, so she raised a cleaver and severed her son's leg herself. While Salvador was trapped in this nightmare, Valeria, who had woken up early, was in the living room sneakily stealing supplies and food. At that moment, terrifying roars came from the basement, sparking her curiosity. She found the key and descended the long staircase into the basement. Valeria cautiously approached the iron bars, only to have her hair seized by a zombie the very next second. Fortunately, Salvador heard the noise and rushed over. He forcefully dragged Valeria aside, while the zombie only managed to tear out a bloody chunk of her hair. Valeria was about to demand an explanation when suddenly her legs were grabbed by the zombies. Salvador could only watch helplessly as Valeria died right before his eyes. When the two younger brothers heard the commotion and ran down, they stumbled upon this gruesome scene. At that moment, the two zombies were fighting over a piece of intestine. After this accident, Salvador became even more determined never to accept any outsiders. They nailed wooden planks over all the windows, then nailed Valeria's body to the yard to prevent her from turning into a zombie. Finally, the three brothers arranged bed sheets in the backyard to form a signal, praying that Russian planes would see it and drop the serum. Meanwhile, the basement zombies, having finally enjoyed a large feast, were now full of energy and spirit. But after tasting delicious human flesh, the two zombies began rejecting rats and frogs. Afraid their parents would starve to death, Benjamin took a machete and tried to cut off pieces from Valeria's corpse. Salvador discovered this and quickly stopped his brother. Feeding zombies human flesh would only make them more bloodthirsty. Knowing Benjamin wouldn't give up, Salvador simply poured gasoline over Valeria's body and set it alight. The two younger brothers completely failed to understand their brother's good intentions. They feared their parents might truly starve to death. But for Salvador, perhaps death was the best outcome for their parents.
¿Quieren matar para darles de comer? No somos asesinos.
A ti te vale que haya una cura porque te valen mamá y papá. Ni siquiera crees que son personas.
Salvador was utterly distraught. His brothers naively saw the zombies as family, yet were cruel enough to want to kill their own kind to feed the monsters. Yet the courage of these two brothers was smaller than a sesame seed. They still foolishly dreamed of going out to kill people. Physically and mentally exhausted, Salvador couldn't be bothered to interfere. He said, "Go ahead and kill someone if you think you can." Things unfolded exactly as Salvador predicted. The children had no idea where to start and were exhausted just digging a trap. Late at night, Salvador helped his brother take off his shoes, then took his crossbow to the basement. The zombies seemed to have been waiting for this day and positioned their heads right at the arrow tip. Yet no matter what his parents had become, Salvador couldn't bring himself to do it. The next day, unusually, Salvador taught his brothers how to make traps, then pointed out a military checkpoint on the map. The last time Salvador went out for supplies, he saw laundry drying there. With luck, they might actually catch a live person. Salvador warned his brothers the walkie-talkie was broken. This operation was entirely up to them. What happened next was the scene shown at the film's beginning. The brothers killed an innocent passerby together, tied the body to their cart, and took it away, unaware that their actions had drawn the attention of the torchmen. After returning home, Salvador didn't say much, simply telling Oliver to process the body himself, chop it into pieces, and feed it to the zombies. That evening, strange roars suddenly echoed through the forest. They had never heard such sounds before and spent the night clutching their weapons in terror. Thankfully, no beasts appeared by morning, until a man smashed through the glass and wooden planks the next morning.
¡Vete, disparo!
No vengo a robar, ni quiero hacer daño a nadie. Solo quiero esconderme.
He claimed he was being hunted by the Torchmen and would rather be shot by Salvador than captured by them outside. Helpless, Salvador let him in. However, this man's behavior was no different from those fanatical believers. He incessantly chanted so-called holy words, mostly repeating the 7 trumpets. The Bible records the 7 angels sounding trumpets as a sign of impending disasters. As he spoke, he tore open his clothes to reveal a tattoo. He too was a member of the Torchmen. At that moment, Enoch's accomplices began chopping through the planks trying to break in. He grabbed broken glass and stabbed Salvador. Hearing their brothers scream, Benjamin and Oliver rushed out despite the danger, helping Salvador into the basement to hide. One of the Torchmen held an axe and didn't want to harm children.
Quedamos que todos los niños.
Hazme caso. Estas bestias impuras no pertenecen.
Now that Salvador was injured and the younger brothers were too small, their only chance was to release the zombies. The smell of living humans sent the zombies into a frenzy. They quickly attacked and killed the 2 men. But Enoch didn't care about his companions' deaths. He threw a smoke grenade into the basement, successfully forcing Salvador and his brothers out, then bound them tightly in the woods. The Torchmen performed a bizarre ritual around a bonfire. Enoch ordered the children's father thrown into the fire to burn, then placed Salvador on the altar.
Dios, proveerá el cordero.
The poor Salvador was brutally murdered by these cultists. The fragile family he had struggled to maintain completely collapsed. Just then, the mother zombie lunged in a surprise attack, freeing Oliver from his ropes. Enoch, confident because he had the serum, dismissed the zombie threat. He pinned the mother zombie to the ground and stabbed her repeatedly. At the critical moment, Oliver appeared carrying a fuel can. He doused Enoch in gasoline and set him alight. Enoch was instantly engulfed in flames, letting out a blood-curdling scream. Oliver quickly saved his brother, then picked up the serum from the ground and injected it into his mother. Unexpectedly, Benjamin was bitten on the wrist by a zombie, and the only dose of serum had been used on their mother. Benjamin cried out in despair. The next day, Oliver buried his father and brother, then left the forest forever with his newly restored mother and his little brother, who had turned into a zombie. Unlike traditional zombie disaster films, this one lacks thrilling action scenes, instead focusing primarily on the relationship between the 3 brothers and their zombie parents. Actually, a monologue at the film's start perfectly captures its core. When Benjamin was still in school, his teacher tried to explain what natural constants are, things that never change no matter what happens, like the passage of time, the tides, the expansion of the universe, day turning into night, and night turning into day. For Benjamin's family, there were only 2 true constants in their lives: family and change. Change happens constantly, but family remains family, enduring as the laws of the universe themselves.